Hello, and welcome back to our series where we are building a people and culture management system. This series is brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, principal consultant here at Prairie HR Solutions. And this is part two of a sub series, I guess, where we are building a uh, scatter plot concerning compensation. We're attempting to plot experience versus salary and then identify which data point is male and female. And then once we have that base functionality set, we can then scale it up for different gender identities or even demographics. So, last episode, what we did was we created our Google app script side, our client or our server side, excuse me. And what we did was we pulled information from our compensation sheet and then we mapped that and constructed an object based on experience being the index 0, salary, and gender. And that is coming from our sheet here, index 0, 1, and 2. And what we also did was we went ahead and formatted these because what we can do is we'll leave it this way to get it functional, and then I'll show you what happens when we leave that plain text. We talked about that a little bit. And what we're going to do is we are going to use Google Charts, the API Google Charts, to essentially create and draw a scatter plot with our data. And that data is not going to be hard coded like it is here. It's going to be dynamically generated from our spreadsheet so we can change it, update it, delete it, or modify it any way we need. Particularly filter it because there are times that you're going to need the full company's compensation picture. But really, once you start drilling into these allowable factors for the disparities, obviously finance is not the same as facilities or HR. So we want to be able to filter down into the divisions, and that will come after we get this built. So what we're going to do is uh, I'm going to leave this open, and I'm going to copy quite a bit of this, but we're going to have to change some because we're not doing an array to a data table. Our data table is going to be dynamically pulled from our Google Apps Script side. So, but we're going to use a lot of this stuff. So if you're following along, I would suggest having this open because that way you'll see where I'm getting a lot of this stuff from. So let's go ahead and jump into this. And we're going to go to our total rewards page. Now, if you remember the last video, we're wanting to render all of this up here. So let's go ahead and start by pulling this piece out. We got to call our chartsloader.js. And where I'm getting this, again, I'm getting this from right here. And then we're going to want to call this piece which is the second portion. Let me make a space there. There we go. Which is the second portion of this. And then we're going to want a ending script tag. There we go. Now you'll notice that I haven't actually snagged this part yet. And the reason I haven't snagged this part is this part will come a little bit later. I want to run some stuff prior to this. So, I can grab this piece here now and just copy it, but I'm going to put some stuff in between these two lines here. So we'll just put that down here. Okay, so forgive me, I'm kind of going back and forward to these pages. I'm not going to keep switching the views, but now you know where I'm getting this information from. So we're calling our charts loader here. And then what we're doing is we created a script tag here, and we're doing this Google Charts load thing, current, and then we're loading this package of the core chart. So now what we need to do is we need to actually focus on getting our data. So let's do a comment here. And this may be confusing at first, and I'm not going to turn this this sub-series here into a full-blown Google Charts API tutorial, because the way I'm envisioning this is we'll get the basic foundation down first, and we may not need to know, you don't need to know exactly what all of this does quite yet. But as we start building other charts or modifying this chart, those pieces will come together. We'll start learning what this is and the packages and, current and this piece. So we'll start learning more and more once we build on and start modifying these this base template here. So let's grab our data and draw the chart. So to do that, we're going to need a function. And this function, let's just call it, let's continue with our originality and say fetch data and draw chart. And what this function is going to do, and we'll change all these once we get it working, is this is simply going to call our get spreadsheet data function and return this. So that's all that function is going to do. So to do that, we are going to do Google script run. Since it's receiving data back, we're going to need a success handler. And the function that we are going to want to call is this get spreadsheet data function. Let's make sure I spelled that wrong or right. Yep. Suppose I could just grab it, copy it, and paste it. So it's going to run this on our Google script side. So now the server side, that Google App Script side, is going to do its thing. It's going to run its function, and then it's going to return that information. And we need it to return to a specific place. So let's simply call this function process data and draw a chart. There we go. So now let's create that function. And I'll just copy this because there's no way I'm going to type that without an error or a typo. There we go. And what this one is going to do is this one here is going to process everything coming over from our analytics side. So this is returning all of this, and that's that array with that object inside of it. So let's give that an identifier. Let's call it data. So this data represents all that stuff coming over from our Google Apps Script side. And what we're going to want to do is, let's go back over here to our page here. So it looks like they're doing draw chart. Okay. We will want to put this in a variable. I don't want to call it data, though. We'll call it something else. And we don't need to do this array to data table. We just simply need to do data table. Okay, so let's come back over here and type that out. Let's create our variable here, and let's make this a constant variable. And let's just call it chart data, because that's really what it is. So we're going to need this new Google visualization. And we're not going to need to do that array to data table. We just simply need to do a data table. So now that we have that stored into a variable, we can start defining things. And the first thing that we want to do is create our columns. So we want to define our columns. Now our columns are going to come to us as that object. So our experience is going to have a value, our salary is going to have a value, and then those two are going to be in the form of a string. And then that last or the number, and then the last column there, that gender column, is going to be in the form of a string, and we're going to need to give it a role. And the role of that is going to be style. So how this is going to look is we want to grab our chart data, and then we want to add a column to that chart data. And now this add column thing, this method here, takes two pieces. One, it needs to know what it's expecting. Is it expecting a number? Is it expecting a string? Is it expecting, whatnot? And then the second piece is, well, what's the name of the object? What's the key? So let's just do single quotations now. And remember, if you're using single quotations, try to stay with single quotations. It just makes it easier. I'm just doing this because that's what Google is using inside that, inside their piece right here. So I'll just try and keep it congruent there. So this is going to be a number. And the reason this is a number is because this is our experience. And then we need another one. It's going to be an add column. And that one is also going to be a number. And this one is going to be salary. Now this next one is going to be a little different because we are adding a column, but we're kind of creating another piece to it. We're defining the type and the role. So we need our curly brackets here, and then we need to give it this type key, and that value is going to be string. And then we also need to give it a role, and that role is going to be a style. Because what we're wanting to do is we are wanting to take essentially those little dots. So let's go back over here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. We're wanting to take each one of these little dots, and we don't want it to all essentially be blue because we want to differentiate between male and female. And in order to do that, we're going to have to change the fill color, which is a style within CSS. So essentially, we're going to be changing the CSS depending on if it's a male or a female. So that's the reason why we're using this. We're declaring this role as a style and the type as a string. Because remember, scatter plots want numbers, but that third one isn't a number. We want it to be a string. We're not going to assign 0 and 1. We're just going to run with the strings. Okay, so there's that. So now what we can do is populate each one of our rows within these columns. And we can do that with a for each loop. We can go through, and for every single row, we can run a function and essentially assign not only the values, but also those colors based on that style or gender, male or female. And what we're going to use isn't, we're not going to do the chart data quite yet. What we're going to use is this data that's coming over. So we simply do data for each. And this for each is going to take the row, and we'll use arrow function here. And what it's going to do is it's going to check to see if the row at the gender key is equal to male. If it is, we want to set it to, I don't know, blue. And then we can check the female and set it to, I don't know, pink. We'll just be, we'll just go base here. And then if not, we can just set it to something like gray. Now we could write an if statement here, but I thought I'd take the opportunity to show a different way to handle if statements, because that's going to take multi-lines. But what we can do is what's called a ternary operator. And let's break this down here. And I'll create a comment here. Check condition using ternary. I'm pretty sure I spelled that wrong. Ternary operator. There we go. And what a ternary operator syntax is you're essentially checking a condition. And if it's true, then you're given a value, and then you're given a value if it's false. So it works just like an if statement. It's just more of a concise way. And what the structure looks like is it looks something like this. We have the condition, and then we separate that with a question mark, and then we give it a value if true, colon, value if false. So what we can do is, instead of writing this whole if, and else statement, is we can simply look at our row gender. Let's look at our row gender here. And we can essentially do something like this. Row, let's see, it'd be row gender is equal to male, because that's what the gender is going to come over as. And then what we need to do is separate it with a question mark and give a value of true. And since we're working on a style and we're going to change the fill color, we need to give it a color. So let's just give it blue. And we could just end it by saying pink for female, but that would limit us to only having two specific genders. So what we can do is also carry this out to say row gender is strictly equal to female. Then we want that to be pink. And I have no idea what the pink color and the blue color is going to look like. We'll have to see how that goes. And then we can give the value if false. And I think it was gray is what we were going to go with. And again, we can always change this, but this way we're not limited to just two genders. Because what we can do is we can build this out to say, row.gender is strictly equal to non-binary, then we make it a different color. And then if all else fails, it's gray. And really the only time all else is going to fail is if that was blank. Okay, so let's store this in a variable. Let's create a variable and store it in, let's just do color. That'll work. Now what we can do is start adding each row, the row experience, row salary, row gender, to these columns. We just have to remember experience is first, salary, and then our color is this third column. And we want to take our chart data for this and simply add a row. Now that row needs to be in an array, and that array is going to be row experience, row salary, and then this is where it's going to get kind of interesting. So we just can't simply, I guess we could, it'd take different, it would take some more work after we did it this way. But what we're essentially wanting to do is we are wanting to assign a color to the point based on the result of this. So if it's male, we want to assign the color blue to that point. If it's female, we want to fill in that point with pink, and gray, obviously, if all else fails. So what we're going to do is use what's called a literal string. And a literal string allows us to build onto functions and sections of code in the form of a string. That's basically a way to think about it. And if you watched that previous videos where we were building in literal strings, it is this back tick. It's not a quotation mark. It's a back tick, and it's usually over there above the tab or the 1 key. And what we're wanting to do is to grab the point, which is the little dot, and we are wanting to fill the color. And what we're wanting to fill the color with is the result of this color. So we can use this $sign, and I'm not going to go too much into depth with this, but we will hit on this when we start really manipulating our charts. This is going to call whatever the result of this is. Good way to think about it. So we can just simply pass the color here, and we need to ensure that our backtick is here. So this backtick encases all of that. And we end that line with a semicolon. And we end this line with a semicolon because this line is our for each. Okay. Sometimes when you do things like this, it gets very, very difficult to keep track of your curly brackets and your parentheses, your square brackets, and whatnot. But we got it. So there's that. Okay, good. So now the other thing that we need to do is, let's come back over here. So we took care of our dynamic data table. That's what we just did. We built, essentially what happened was we took a sheet full of rows and columns, a data table that we would use to build out a chart within the spreadsheet, and we turned that into an object encased in an array, sent it over to our HTML, then deconstructed it in a way that we wanted to build out a data table. And this data table is used to actually build our chart. So you'll notice that we have 8, 12. When you're thinking of X, Y, those are where they intersect. So 8, 12 is right here. So this is essentially what we just created. Now we need to work on these options. So let's go back over here and just use their same syntax here, or their same naming conventions. We can just come up here and say chart options. So let's give a construct or a constant variable called options. And what these options are going to be is also in the form of an object with value key pairs. The first one we want is a title. That title, let's call it something like salary based on experience. Okay. Nope, it's an object, so we need a comma. And then we need an x-axis. And that x-axis is going to be another object with a title. And our title, we'll call this experience years. That's what we called it in our sheet. The v-axis going to be the same thing, except this title is going to be salary, and we'll do USD. And then a legend, I'm going to put the legend in here. We're not going to have a legend right now, but we'll have it when we build it. And then let's define our point size. And let's go back over here and see. Okay, our point size. Okay, let's come down here. Okay, they do have point sizes. Good. So you can see we can actually customize this quite a lot. That one's doing some sort of weird thing. Not sure about that. But it looks like we can change the shape of each and the point size. So point size 18, those are pretty large. So let's change it to 5 for right now, just to see how that's going to look. Again, we can always change it. And then that should end our constant options. Now what we need to do is draw the chart. Let's see, draw chart. And let's create a constant variable. We'll call that simply chart, and that'll be new Google visualization. And this is a scatter chart. And again, where I'm getting this is simply right here. I'm not using var, I'm using constant, but I'm getting this right here. And then we'll just go ahead and use this whole piece right here. And again, we can always change. I think 900 or 500 may be big. Maybe I'll just do 6 and 6. But this way we can use what we have to create this. Okay, so let's go back over here. So we're creating a scatter chart, and then we're going to grab a document, get element by ID, and that ID is chart div. And again, we can change this after we get done. And what we're going to want to do is chart draw, and we want to use our chart data because we didn't use data. Our data was what we were passing as an argument. We want to use this chart data, and we also want to pass our options. And then this, make sure that this here, okay, let's see, where is that? This should be that right there. Yes, it is. Okay, good. Good. So now outside of this function, what we want to do is ensure Google Charts is ready before getting the data. And we're not wanting it to draw the chart because that's not what we called our function. We called our function this. So this is what we want to run. And we have 2 more things to do. What we want to do is figure out when we want to call this. And it's going to run, and it's going to have all the data ready. Essentially, it's going to be prepared for, but we need to run it essentially in the body. So what we can do is go to our body, and when our body is being loaded, when this is all being populated here, we want to then run that function. So we're essentially calling the API up here, and it's getting ready to load the code chart with the current. And then once the body starts loading, then it kicks off all of our functions here. Okay, so now we need a place for this stuff to dump, which is this chart div. So let's come down here and let's populate it right after our subcategories. And what we're going to do is we are wanting to, let's just create another div. And let's give that div the class container again. Container, there we go. And in this container, we want to give it some sort of, heading. So let's do heading 3, and this is going to be salary based on experience. And then what we need to do is create that chart div thing. So let me go over here and grab this. And we'll just plug it in right there, except I don't really want this to be that tall. We'll just do 6 and 6 for now. And then what we can do is change that and make it look a little nicer. Okay, I think we got everything. So let's save, moment of truth. Let's save and see if we somehow did this right on our first go. Let's go over here to our analytics and make sure we're returning it. Yep. All right. So let's share this tab here. It's saved. So let's refresh this and see what we got. Okay, salary based on experience. There we go. Internet seems to be having a little bit of a hiccup, but there we go. Perfect. So now we have our data being populated. This is obviously our salary. This is our experience. And as you can see, females are pink, males are blue. So if we were looking at this based on gender disparity, pay disparity, I mean, we have some work to do. We do definitely have some work to do. But we essentially created a function that goes over to our spreadsheet and pulls that data. And to kind of show what I was talking about here is let's create somebody just brand new, been here 6 months, and they're making, let's say, 160,000, and they are a male. So now what we can do is we can look for this 0.5160. You can see that we don't have a 160 here. But when we refresh this data and this page, it will then dynamically go and grab it and pull it up if it's formatted correctly, which it should be. As you can see, it now dynamically modified itself to include that new salary. So good. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. And what we can start doing in future videos is modifying this, because one thing that I would like to do is not necessarily grab the data from its own separate tab, because I mean, we have it here. So I would like to change our code to grab the employee data from here, and then also work on adding different colors for our non-binary selection. and then maybe doing some other work with our with the styling of our chart and whatnot. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this was useful. If you do find these episodes and series beneficial, please hit that subscribe button so we know to um, keep producing and providing this content. If you do have an idea for content that you would like us to put together, please shoot us an email. We'll be more than happy to see what we can do and get something out there. And until next time, please take care.